sorry?
Is George going to be part of the meeting?
He has something to present.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, he is. Both he and Al are going to give us a statement.
You are streaming.
All right. Thank you for coming, George.
So it is 6:30, I'm gonna.
Yep.
My name's Alan Plummer, I'm the Code Enforcement Officer for Durham. At 6:30, we're gonna start this Board of Appeals meeting. Thank you for coming. We do have an agenda, it's on that chair if you don't have one of those. And I'll get to the reason we're here in a second, but if we could have a roll call, and I'll do that. Terry Kirk is here, Neil Berry is here, Byron Philbrick is here, and Paul First is here.
Yep.
That constitutes a quorum. Help me with the people that aren't here.
Milt,
Bill Simon.
Milt Simon is absent. He couldn't make it.
I believe that's it.
That's it, and we don't have alternates, but there are open seats if anyone's interested. So there's that. So we do have a quorum. We could just rise and take your hats off and salute the flag.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alan.
Thanks.
Okay, and I believe we have some administrative business to take care of before we get to the hearing this evening. And the first item of that business is the approval of the minutes. And first of all, I want to say thank you, Neil, for working on those minutes. I know how much work that is to put those together. So, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I will.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. So I have just a couple of brief comments. If at some point, and we're getting started here with new secretary, new chair, trying to get everybody on the same page. So I think it might be a good time to offer a couple of suggestions. One is with regard to the beginning of the meeting when we do the record of evidence. Basically, what's being presented to the board. Great if we can somehow, if it's a really long list, if you can just point to it, make mention of the application package, so at least then whoever's reading the minutes at some point in the future knows that there is a significant packet they need to look at that's hopefully on file with the town. They can do that. And then the only other comment I have, and we can think about this moving forward, I would suggest we go ahead and dispense of the minutes this time around. But the only other item is if, especially in a variance, if at the end of the approval of the criteria, if the board offers a statement or something saying why we ruled the way we did, it would be wonderful it's important to try to capture that if we can. So if you have any questions on that, certainly feel free to contact me after the fact.
You do not want to do minutes for this meeting?
No, I think we go ahead and take these minutes that you've done and we approve them. And then on future minutes, just 2 suggestions for future minutes, keep them on. Because, I realize it's a lot of time to put these minutes together. And, we want to keep going. So we do have, there's a video recording, there's the decision, And there's a lot of, great information in the minutes. But if we can if we can pull those two things together, then I think we'll have it for for future stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so all those in favor of approving the minutes, and the date on those minutes, January 22nd. Please signify in the usual manner. All right, so we've got 4, so it's 4-0. No one is opposed. Okay, so the next item is appointments. And we had just a brief conversation with the CEO while we were getting started here prior to the meeting opening. And it sounds like Byron hasn't been moved yet by the selectmen. They haven't made the decision to move him from associate to regular member. So what I will do, and in order for us to have a quorum tonight, because we're down a member and an associate, and we are missing Milt Simon. In order to have a quorum, I will ask Byron if he would please serve in the capacity of a regular voting member this evening, which is allowed by our ordinance. So, Byron, you are a full voting member this evening. And then the other item under appointments, in the ordinance, it states that if there's a vacancy, that the secretary should send a letter to the selectmen. And that after the selectmen receive this letter, they have 60 days to appoint someone. So maybe it would be a good idea for us to get that going.
Yep.
Give them a little incentive to go ahead and get this done. So my understanding is there are 2 issues that we're looking to get accomplished here. And one is for Byron to be promoted from associate, current associate, to be moved up into a membership position. And the other is for 2 new associates to be appointed. So, however you'd like to word that. And you can then pass that on to, if you could CC Alan and I, that'd be wonderful. And then Alan can pass that on to the selectmen.
The selectmen have to make a permanent appointment, right?
Yeah, that's my understanding. What's your recollection of that with
Yeah,
regard
that
to, for
is the way
example,
it
Byron?
is.
Yeah, exactly.
And he had to.
They've got to make it permanent. You
Yeah.
don't just automatically move from associate to
No.
regular.
No.
That's
We can
what-
vote him in as a
That's what I
voting member
kept telling them.
tonight.
Yeah, yeah.
He's going to be always an alternate to the selectmen.
Thank you, Terry. So as usual, all your experience with this committee is,
Do we need to vote
Invaluable.
on
Yeah.
Byron tonight? We
Well,
need to vote?
Yes.
I will say, according to the ordinance, it says it's within the chair's power just to do it.
Yep, perfect.
But if you guys want to vote, because I know in the past,
I
we
believe you.
voted.
I believe you.
So I'm fine either way. But look, hey, let's not break with tradition. Let's do a vote.
So moved.
Okay, second. Do we have a
I
second?
second
All those in favor?
I'll
Okay,
abstain.
very good. So 3-0, 1 abstention to appoint Byron for this evening as a full voting member.
Only.
All right, very good. Okay, so that takes care of our administrative business. And now we're moving on to our new business. And that is, we have an appeal in front of us. And this is the Hager appeal. And the business before us tonight is a zoning boundary clarification that's requested by Howard and Sandra Hager. And I will ask a question right up front. So I noticed that the date on the application was November 3rd, 23, is that right?
It's like 9.
9? Okay, November 9, thank you. So, could you fill us in there? Why is that, is
Yes.
that so long ago?
Yep. Again, my name's Alan Plummer, and I'm the administrative staff person for the Board of Appeals. I have no say in the board's decisions or deliberation at all. I can answer questions if they have them for me. The appeal came in, and I began to process it, and I have quite a few things to do in order to do that. In that process, Mr. Hager got in touch with me and said, hold on a second, I need you to just postpone this for the time being. So I did postpone it. I asked him to send me a letter. He sent me a letter on November 16th postponing it indefinitely, and then he got back in touch with me not too long ago.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and that's why it's so
Great.
long from the initial date.
Yeah, thank you.
I do want to state a couple things. Some of the information, so this doesn't have to do a lot with me, the code officer. Lots of times appeals do, but this doesn't. It has more to do with the resource protection change that happened last year at annual meeting. I'm not as familiar with the details of that. I've asked George Taberge, our planner, to be here to answer any questions with regard to those
Wonderful.
issues.
Yes, and thank you, George. And we're almost to that point where we'll ask you guys for your statements and to, for you to give your piece of this.
I have a question.
Yep, Terry.
The appeal tonight is not for any variances or anything else, correct?
It is an administrative appeal. It's a little bit different than some other ones that we've
So
had.
what they're asking us to do is change an ordinance,
No,
No,
we can't change the ordinance.
change the boundaries of an ordinance.
they're looking at boundaries of something that had changed, yes.
Yes, and there is, I can read for you something in the ordinance that might
I know
help
what it
clarify.
says.
You know what it says?
I already know what it says.
Okay, and basically what it says is that they can request a boundary clarification as part of an appeal, okay? Now, I will say this appeal, it's a little bit of a gray area because it's not a decision of the code enforcement officer. The code enforcement officer hasn't made a decision that's being appealed, okay? But it also says right after that, or the code enforcement officer can request clarification of a boundary. And so I think that it's important that if we're going to look at this tonight, that the code enforcement officer needs to formally ask us to look at it. And then, then we have the jurisdiction to do it, or we have the power to do it.
I think with discussion this afternoon with the town manager and George, I think you have the authority anyway, even if I don't ask that.
Yeah,
But I can certainly ask that.
I think it's a good idea because, I read the ordinance literally with that, in that regard. And I'd like us to, stick as close as we can to the ordinance when we're serving in our capacity
Sure.
as board members. Okay, so let's see, we've received quite a number of things for the record, and I will say the other piece of that with regard to administrative appeals is, if this is an administrative appeal, then we're not allowed to, we can't allow de novo evidence, okay? So you're not allowed to look at evidence that was not provided to the code enforcement officer when they were making the decision. Again, this is something a little different because you didn't make a decision. But I think that it also, by you asking for the clarification, it also addresses that concern. So we have quite a number of things here. We have a application package from the Hagars that's quite comprehensive. And it includes, just very briefly here, their application. It includes a letter from the Hagars. And it includes letters from to IFNW and from or correspondence, I'll just put it at that, correspondence to IFNW and from IFW, to IFNW and from IFNW. It also includes correspondence to beginning with Habitat Program and from beginning with Habitat Program. And correspondence, I believe, with George Tabarge, or information, the town planner, or information from him. And anything that I'm missing of note? Oh, also a report from Labella, which I believe is conducted a natural resource assessment of the property, which is on Runaround Pond Road, 292 Runaround Pond Road. So we have quite a comprehensive record here. And thank you to the applicants and to the town officials for putting such a comprehensive packet together. Okay, so now on to the next step. I did ask Alan just to flesh out the agenda a little bit. So we've got some steps to follow to hopefully get through this tonight fairly efficiently, because we've got a lot of people. I see a lot of neighbors here this evening. That's wonderful. We do have a public hearing portion of the meeting scheduled. So after the town officials give their statements and the applicants give their statement, and we entertain questions from the board, we'll open a public hearing. And so anyone from the public who'd like to speak about this issue can come up and speak. I ask that when you come up, you state your name, and then you can make your statement. Okay, but let's get started with our town official statements. Alan, would you like to start? And then I'll allow you to hand it off to George.
Sure. So, just as a note, notifications were done to the newspaper. 3 points around town: the town office, the Get and Go, and the elementary school. On the town website, the town Facebook page, and abutter notifications were sent to the abutters. One of the abutters is the state of Maine. They have no mailing address. Nothing was sent to them. But the 3 other abutters were notified in due time. The appeal is laid out as an administrative appeal, although it's been discussed, it's a little bit different than an administrative appeal. But the Hagers are seeking relief from all ordinance restrictions related to resource protection. And they've provided the information in these 2 packets, which the board has gotten. I am less familiar with the town ordinance and the restrictions and the details about resource protection, so I have asked George to come to elaborate on those specifics, and he's done that.
Before you get there, could you please make your request?
Yes, I would like to have a boundary determination by the Board of Appeals related to this appeal.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else, or does that sound good?
I think that's good.
Good. All right, George, could you come up and give us a brief history of...
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is George Tabarge, and I am the town planner for Durham. And you have a request for a boundary interpretation submitted to you for hearing tonight. I do believe that under the land use ordinance and the relevant sections are section 2, subsection 2.3.A.6, which says where the physical or cultural features existing on the ground are at variance with those shown on the official zoning map, or in circumstances where items covered by the paragraphs dealing with boundary interpretation are not clear, the Board of Appeals shall interpret the district boundaries. Now, every other community that I've worked before has this authority to interpret the map boundaries delegated to the planning board, because the planning board prepares the zoning map and presents it to the legislative body, in your case, the town meeting. But in Durham's ordinance, it's okay to do this, but that authority has been delegated to the Board of Appeals. So this is a very typical provision, because when zoning maps are adopted, they're done on a town-wide basis based on the best available data, which is usually at a regional or a town-wide level. And so determining the precise boundaries in the field, so for example, a floodplain boundary, it is a general and fairly accurate description of where the boundary lies, but on any individual piece of property, you really need a surveyor to go out there and determine where the actual flood boundary is to establish the appropriate setbacks or district boundary. And so in on a town-wide map scale, the accuracy might be within 1 or 100 feet. And if somebody's doing a setback, they need within a foot or less accuracy. So this is a very typical process, as I said, that's done in most towns through a planning board review. And the typical process is for a property owner who believes that the map is in error to get qualified professionals to bring in objective field-tested data to show where the boundary is based on the language of the ordinance and the map. So the other empowering provision is in Article 17, which basically refers to that provision. And so Article 17.3.d says district boundary line interpretation and interpretation of zone boundaries may be made as part of an appeal hearing or made at the request of the Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, or Code Enforcement Officer. And I understand, and I think it's fine that you tried to deal with the apparent conflict of what the provisions are for administrative appeals, but in any case, I fully believe that this board has the authority to grant the relief that's being requested by the applicants. So I have reviewed the record, and I would just conclude by suggesting that I think the most important documents in the submissions are the letter from Inland Fisheries and Wildlife.
Yeah, if we could go through those slowly.
Yeah, so in the letter from the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, beginning with Habitat Program, dated January 29th, 2024.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, so this is a letter written to Mr. Hagar based on the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife review of the beginning with Habitat maps, which serve as the basis, partly for the basis of the Resource Protection District. And I would point you to the second page of that letter, 2 key paragraphs. And the first one is the third paragraph down, the first full paragraph on that begins in early 2023. The undeveloped habitat block was updated with better information on existing development using updated land cover data. This undeveloped habitat block now excludes developed portions of your property and more accurately represents setbacks from development. With these areas excluded from the undeveloped habitat block, this portion of your property has a co-occurrence value of less than 6.
Yes.
Beginning with Habitat is in the process of reviewing and updating the co-occurrence map for the town of Durham to reflect these changes. And then the following paragraph says, in attachment B, which is the last, I think it's the last page of this handout, you will find updated maps reflecting this correction to the undeveloped habitat block. In this map, a 250-foot setback has been applied to previously developed portions of your property following the undeveloped habitat block mapping formula. A more accurate map could also be produced from a survey or other site plan which measures the horizontal distance of 250 feet from the existing development. So there are actually 2 options for the board to consider in terms of a potential interpretation of the map boundary based on this letter. The first would be to look at the developed portions of the property as being that it clearly is not should not be part of the Resource Protection District because it's a developed portion of the property. The second would be to follow the recommendation of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife to put a 250-foot development buffer around the development of the property. That is their methodology that went into their preparation of the maps. And then the other piece of relevant information, most relevant information, is the Labella Natural Resources Assessment
Right here.
dated January 23rd, 2024. And in that extensive report, where they looked at a lot of different environmental issues, but I think the key one, the key data that's provided in this report is found on page 7. And about halfway down the page, you see MDIFW, Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, beginning with habitat. Mapping currently includes the study area, and the study area in this report is the Hagar property. It includes it in a rare, threatened, or endangered wildlife state listed animal habitats due to the sighting of the Blanding turtle documented on May 13th, 2000. This animal was located on Chesley Hill Road, just east of Davis Road, and was observed close to a highly vegetated stream surrounded by agricultural fields along a dirt road. This location is approximately 0.65 miles from the study area. And then the very last paragraph of that same page, it says, although the study area is encompassed within the rare, threatened, and endangered wildlife state listed animal habitats layer, the data collected during this assessment is not consistent with the Blanding turtle's habitat. So basically, you have a wildlife biologist giving testimony, giving research data that says the land within their property is not Blanding turtle habitat. And if you connect that back with the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife data, they said that 3 of the 6 points were based on the Blanding turtle habitat value.
Study area, was it the whole property?
Just their property, the whole property, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, okay?
And they
so-
found no habitat on their property that they thought was consistent with Blanding turtle habitat?
Absolutely, that's what they found. And they describe all of that in their report. And so then on page 8, they make a recommendation of where a more accurate boundary could be placed. So at the bottom of page 8, it says, the very last paragraph says, Labella, that's the consultant, the environmental consultant, understands that your plans for future property improvements would be within the already developed portion of the study area, which is approximately 100 feet from the nearest wetland. Assuming you maintain a buffer of at least 75 feet, you would not need to file any MDEP permits. And then finally, in their report,
Well, is this wetland, a wetland on their property?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, that they mapped. And so
Yeah.
the very last page of their handout
Yeah.
is figure 5. It's a map titled MWI Mapped Wetlands with Buffer, figure 5.
Okay, yeah,
Okay, is everybody there?
So,
okay.
Yeah, so they are suggesting that an accurate boundary of the Resource Protection District based on their data would be the black line, which is 250 feet from the wetland watershed resources depicted on the towns and state maps. So there are 3 different potential, more accurate boundaries that the board could consider. The first being just the developed area of the parcel. The second being the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife recommended buffer of 250 feet from that developed area, or based on the wildlife biologist's assessment that none of their property, or just a very fringe of it, even begins to qualify for the criteria of the ordinance for resource protection.
The black line you're referring to, George, is just on the very right, that just kind of curves in?
Yep, just touches the edge of the
And on the
property.
very upfront part?
Yeah, and that would be a 250-foot buffer from the protected resources.
Now, here's my question.
Yep.
So that new line that they're drawing, does that only affect the applicant or the appellant's property, or does that also affect other properties?
It would not affect any other property, as we've discussed on past applications. The Board of Appeals only has authority.
Yes, okay, yep, yep, thank you.
To deal with the property in appeal.
Okay, so these properties that are, I'm looking at figure 5, oh, I see. All right. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
George, so since beginning with habitat change, the first paragraph you referenced on page 2 of,
Yeah.
doesn't that mean the developed portion, how did they, would come out automatically?
Well, it comes out automatically from the beginning with habitat data, but the zoning map can only be changed at town meeting.
Oh.
What's the plan? So here's the challenge, right? So, you have data that's not static, right? It's changing. And, or it's not controlled by us.
Right.
So is there a plan? Has this been discussed? How updates to the zoning ordinance? will
Yes,
happen?
and I actually presented to the Board of, the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission. I believe Mr. Hagar included some of that documentation in his appeal materials, where I had presented doing the option A, which is to carve out all of the clearly developed areas based on aerial photography from the Resource Protection District. And the planning board, the Conservation Commission suggested that they were comfortable with that, but members of the planning board were not comfortable with it on the basis of they thought it should be much more accurate than just aerial photography review.
I guess my question is.
Yep.
So IF&W is saying that, for example, this large undeveloped habitat blocks layer, the large undeveloped habitat blocks of 1,200 acres or larger, that they've updated that layer.
Correct.
Okay, so that may mean that there are other properties now that have changed. or,
Correct.
That the boundary has changed in other places. So at town meeting, or my understanding of the ordinance is that it's this 6+, if you're over,
Yeah.
if you hit 6+, if you hit that co-occurrence threshold of 6+, then you fall into this resource protection zone.
Correct.
Or that's one of the criteria, at least.
Yes.
So are you, at some point, at what point will you say, oh, we need to update the ordinance and take it to town meeting?
Well, there will be, after this current upcoming town meeting, there will be a meeting of the leaders of all of the boards and commissions dealing with land use. The Board of Appeals will be invited, the Historic District Commission, the Conservation Commission, and the Planning Board. And at that meeting, they will discuss needed changes in the ordinance, and this will be one of the things I will be presenting to them, is the
Okay.
need to update the zoning map based on the latest beginning with habitat data.
Ah, okay, very good. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yep. But in the meantime, this property
got
owner
it.
and any other property owner
Yeah.
has under the ordinance,
Of course.
the right to appeal to the board or
Yeah.
request an interpretation, and that gives them immediate relief rather than having to wait for another year of process.
Yeah, exactly. Neil?
So is it legitimate to say that based on, I assume LaBelle is certified somehow in what they do, that based on their boots on the ground, eyes on the ground evaluation, that this land does not really hit the what do they call themselves?
Beginning with habitat.
Beginning with
Beginning with
habitat
habitat.
criteria,
And beginning with habitat itself has stated the same
at least
thing.
part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you guys are talking about two different things here. I think he's
Mm-hmm.
talking about the whole property.
Yes.
You're talking about.
That's correct.
Has Beginning of Habitat commented on the labella work?
They did not reference it in their letter.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
So we could just, I'm not sure what the right language is, but grant the appeal based on LaBella's
You could use either
evaluation.
of these documents or both of them to select any of those boundaries that you feel is the most appropriate.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, Terry?
If we grant the appeal, and this comes before town meeting in a year, and the planning board has changed this again, will we be right back here again?
The planning board can't change it.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, it's changed at a town meeting.
Well, yes, at any point in the future, town meeting, the legislative body can change the zoning map just like they did before. So there's nothing to prevent the ordinance or the map from being changed in one direction or the other in the future.
Yeah.
I would anticipate, based on the need to have whatever you do supportable by scientific evidence, that if anything, if any change is made, it's gonna go in this direction.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, very good. That's very helpful, and before we get too far into discussion and questions, I think we ought to hear from the applicant. And I believe it's Howard and Sandra? You know, maybe I should just state for the record, I believe that turtle was sighted. I mean, I've only owned the property for 6 years, but I believe the turtle was sighted there on our property line. We're on Chesley Hill Road.
Right in
And so
front
we're neighbors.
Right in front
We
of
are.
your house.
Yeah.
Right at the corner of your back lot and Michael Friendly's on the Conservation Commission.
Okay.
Stranger thing.
Yes, exactly. That's where it was. I don't believe there's a conflict there because, in terms of the conflict of interest, because that's the only habitat, I'm only 3 points. I'm not in resource protection, so I don't believe I have a pecuniary interest. If anyone else on the board feels that, otherwise, but it's probably worth just disclosing for the record. Thanks. Well, thank you for coming tonight, and, I'm sorry that you've been dealing with all this, but we're happy to have you here and to help you try to get it sorted out.
Thank you for having us. This may be evidence that is not admissible, but I brought larger maps. If you have any question about the smaller maps that are usually all you have to look at, but it may be not admissible. So, we are Howard and Sandra Hager, 292 Runaround Pond Road. We lived in Durham for 40 years. Our daughter and family live on a portion of our land at 290 Runaround Pond Road. We are coming before the Board of Appeals to request relief from the 2023 Land Use Ordinance. It has been said by Maine Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, Durham board members, town planner, that the accuracy of resource protection boundaries and habitat mapping may not be totally accurate and is considered subjective and measured from 30,000 feet. Town officials have made it clear that resource protection boundaries could not be challenged without data provided by a qualified state or private biologist. We have provided a natural resource assessment with wetland and stream delineation. The survey describes our property as being capable of providing wildlife habitat, but would not support endangered species such as the Blandings turtle, for reasons discussed further in the $3,500 report. Furthermore, the existence of a Blandings turtle population is considered unlikely by this study, as well as by the state's own biologists. Only one has been seen in the year 2000, almost 24 years ago. We have offered further data and supporting statements for relief by the Beginning with Habitat team of Maine Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. It is our contention that there are omissions, errors, inconsistencies, and conflicts of interest in the planning and implementation of this ordinance. The most outstanding inconsistency was the implementation of resource protection warrant itself, causing confusion from the beginning. In the March 15th, 2022 public hearing, while interpreting a two-tiered, 2-year warrant, the select board chair said, and I quote, "Obviously, it's a much bigger conversation when you're talking about putting property into resource protection versus taking property out," unquote. On March 1st, 2023, a final warrant drafted as a 2-tiered vote, then sent out in letters to residents. 320 of 480 properties were slated to be taken out of redefined flood zones. 30 properties to be placed into resource protection. At the last minute, the warrant changed. It became one vote to accomplish both warrant articles, by the rationale that the first was too confusing. The result being the lifting of restriction for the many residents far outweighed the few. Various town officials have stated throughout the process that residents who feel their property has been devalued by this ordinance could go to the tax assessor and ask for an abatement on their taxes. Yet it is our experience, and others, that this is a hard no. Since the beginning of resource protection, town officials have been using mapping information from Maine Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, GIS, and Greater Portland Council of Governments, who provide the data for the Durham parcel and map with the butters, all offering inaccurate data in reference to our property. On March 27th, 2023, the town planner acknowledged he did not know where the physical location of our residence was, being confused with our daughters. On December 12th, 2023, the GIS mapping was corrected after many attempts and many deflections. On January 29th, 2024, the coordinator of Beginning with Habitat team at Maine Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, Justin Slowin, wrote us a letter. He provides proof due to a mapping error, our property does not abut an undeveloped habitat block of over 1,200 acres. If it were for this error alone, we would not be here this evening, even though the town chooses to accept contradictory evidence of the existence of a Blandings turtle population. This correction alone would change our score below 6. He went on to say, due to a plus or minus 5% error margin in the national land cover data, we were mistakenly not recognized as a developed area. He also gave a clear definition of developed areas with setbacks, a long-sought explanation never clearly given by the town. The town asked us to believe that our home, developed area, and business were invisible to them on the undeveloped habitat block map within the many imperceptible shades of green. It is implausible to believe that since 2018, the town did not know there was a business and residence located at 292 Runaround Pond Road. In the past year, we have been consumed by attempting to learn about the town's methods, trying to get answers and receiving mostly deflections. We have watched most of the planning board meetings regarding resource protections as they consistently kick the can down the road and finally kick it out of the park, at least until town meeting 2025. The thought of spending another second year at this is unthinkable for us. We believe we are the most affected residents and business in the town of Durham to suffer a monetary loss to our real estate devaluation and substantial direct costs defending ourselves against the ordinance. We feel our rights and liberties have been denied. According to the ordinance section 2.3, 8.6, it is within the appeals board authority to make zoning district boundary determinations. Considering the data we have provided to this body, we respectfully request that the resource protection boundaries on our land be returned to the historic location pre-April 1st, 2023. As a fallback position, for now, we would consider recognizing our developed area without restrictions, as described in the detailed letter by Justin Slowin's letter. In a phone conversation today with Justin, he informed us that a new co-occurrence map is being drafted for the town of Durham, coming out in late April of this year. Early April of this year. He indicated that there will be changes in the state's position on the Blandings turtle in Durham and at Runaround Pond.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last
The whole thing?
piece? No, just the last sentence regarding the Blandings turtle. The very last sentence regarding the
I'm
Blandings
trying to
turtle.
find it. On a phone conversation today with Justin, he informed us of a new co-occurrence map being drafted for the town of Durham coming out early April of this year.
Okay,
He indicated that there will be changes in the state's position on the Blandings turtle in Durham and at Runaround Pond.
Perfect, thank you.
Mr. Hager, can you give me a copy of that?
I can make one when I get to a copy of it.
Or email it to me, or?
Sure, absolutely. You just have to give me an address.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hager. And is there anything else you folks would like to add?
You want to give him this one?
I think that,
Is this the first page?
as I mentioned, you provided a pretty comprehensive packet. I know I took a few hours today and read through it all and tried to get a reasonable understanding of what's going on. And it was very helpful to hear from our town planner, Mr. Tabarich.
Yes. Well, I would simply say, if you read that, I would hope you would understand that it is our hopes to make some changes with our living situation, and that having to wait to the town meeting of 2025 really puts a big wrench in our gears to move on. It's a situation we've been trying to rectify for a long time, and it's time for us to do that.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have other questions for the Hagers? Okay, not at this time. I'm sure as we move forward that additional questions will come up.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I'd like, as we've got the statement of the applicant, this would be a good moment for us to have some general questions and discussion from the board members, if you have them, of what we've heard so far before we open the public hearing and we hear from the public.
I have a question.
Terry.
Where would the, on this map, what would we be eliminating that was voted in as resource protection?
He's looking at the Labella last page on the Labella report,
Figure 5.
figure 5. So
Figure 5.
everything, the only thing that would be included in the buffer would be the small fringe black circles around the Hagar's property, one to the southeast, a corner on the northeast, and the corner on the northwest.
Yes,
Now-
and-
Now, my question is where does this line go if we grant the appeal for him? Where does this line go? You can't cut it off right there, can you?
It stays right there. That's the buffer. That is considered the buffer area for these areas. So those would remain. Everything else here would not be in resource protection. Does that let you see that, Paul?
yes.
Yep.
So,
Where the black line is, that's resource, this is resource protection?
It would be due to a buffer, due to the buffers around these areas.
yeah, help
This
me,
one.
Alan, what's the yellow line in this?
The yellow line is.
George, I'm not sure.
You looking
Is-
at the Labella report?
Yes, the last page, figure 5.
100-foot NWI buffer.
Yeah,
That's
okay,
probably the
thanks, yeah, 100
100
foot, got it, thanks.
Yeah, that is it.
All right,
Yep, 100 foot right there, 100 foot.
all right.
100-foot floodplain?
No, National Wetlands Inventory,
So
NWI.
we're just moving the buffer, that's all. They're asking us to move the
No,
buffer.
no, they're
No,
not.
actually, they're not.
Okay, so basically, at this point, at this time, Terry, almost this whole property is in resource protection, not just the buffer, but,
Well, I
resource
can-
protection.
If it has anything to do with this map that I just looked at,
Let's look
right
at,
here.
Yes,
is that the today? I can't see what he's looking at.
that's under resource protection. That is the resource protection. More than that, that is the majority of it, yes.
Yeah, so the majority of it is in resource
The
protection,
majority.
and including the business.
But, yeah.
Now,
so-
and Terry, the reason that it's in resource protection is because it met the threshold for co-occurrence according to the data, okay, according to this IF&W data. So it scored 3 points because it was supposed to be at least part of this 1,200 acre undeveloped tract. And it scored 3 points because of this Blanding turtle sighting. Now, what IF&W did with this Blanding's turtle sighting is they said, okay, well, somebody saw a turtle here 25 years ago, all right? Now, we're gonna plop down a big circle around that sighting, and they happen to be in that circle, in that big buffer around that turtle sighting, which is, I don't know how many feet, or, you know, it's like, maybe it's 3/4 of a mile, I don't know.
That's
Mile and a half, okay. So they wanted to protect that area around where the turtle was seen. So that's why almost all the property is currently in resource protection. Now, on the face of it, there is kind of an obvious conflict. How can you have a business, a large, you know, a significant business with a large developed area in a 1,200 acre undeveloped tract? It doesn't really work. So, you know, even
Right from the beginning.
there was, right from the beginning, there seems to be an issue here, that there was an issue with the data. To fix it, 3 scenarios are being proposed, okay? One scenario is to just take out the business out of the resource protection area, okay? But since all of this occurred, IF&W has come back and they've said, you know what, we've looked at your case, and you're right. Our map, our 1,200 acre, our layer, which is this 1,200 acre tract of undeveloped land, is wrong. That's my understanding. And we should have had taken out your business. You know, at some point, we should have taken that out. And so they did that.
Regardless of that, I should
They
have
fixed the data.
developed area.
Right, they fixed it because you have a developed area. It's a developed area.
But it really has nothing to do with the uninhabited land blocks. That's a different,
Well, that's one of the metrics that contributes to your,
Yes.
contributed to your score of 6.
yes, correct.
Exactly. So IF&W is basically saying, yeah, you know, we have new data. And so our old data wasn't accurate. And under the current data, this developed area wouldn't be included, and we would also include a 250-foot buffer around the developed area. So that would give them more property outside of resource protection than just taking out the business,
But not all of their property.
but not all of their property. And then the third option is to take all of their property out, and that is, at least my understanding, that's what the report here from Labella suggests, is that because they weren't able to find evidence of habitat of the Blanding's turtle on their property, that really their property as a whole shouldn't be in resource protection.
If we take his property out of resource protection, does the buffer change?
It's not, the buffer is not really the issue. It's really what's in resource protection and what's out. So, you know, the buffer map is a little confusing. You know, what we're talking about here is a town zoning map, and it doesn't include the buffers. It's either you're in resource protection or you're out. Is that correct, Alan and George?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I do have some diagrams that I can put up on that board.
Yes,
that I think
thank
will
you,
help
George. Thank
By all
you.
means.
illustrate that.
Come on up.
Hopefully you will see. Yep. Okay, good. So what I'll do-
You have those? You can have this if you want, or you can look at those, either way. That's the same thing he's putting up there.
Okay, so, I actually have a handout that will give you the GIS coverages for this, so you can refer to those. So basically, I've prepared 5 diagrams, which are on these handouts. So this is the property, this is the developed portion of the property, and this is the zone from the zoning map.
So that's current.
This is the current,
Yeah.
this is the current entirety of the Resource Protection District, which includes the state mandatory shoreland zoning around this portion of the Runaround Brook. And then other resource protection components are explained on this map. So, and actually, I think I might have put this out of sequence. This part right here of their property in its entirety, is, with the exception of that little corner, is based on the beginning with Habitat 6+. So if you pull off the beginning with Habitat 6+, what's left is our resource protection based on 10-acre plus wetlands in this area, the floodplain along the brook, and a stream buffer on this part that's not part of the state shoreland zoning. So I think this GIS analysis clearly indicates the only reason that this property is within the resource protection district is because of the land and turtle habitat. So the 2 options for altering this is the beginning with habitat recommendation, which is to put a 250-foot buffer, development buffer, around the developed portion of the property. And the alternative of just doing the developed portion of the property is illustrated down here in map 5 of my presentation. And the biologist has recommended going beyond either of these 2 and pulling it all the way back almost to the property line and leaving a 250-foot buffer around these resources.
I've got a question about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the biologist is recommending that.
Yeah.
But when I look at their map, I don't see, so look to the other side, to your side of their property.
Yep.
That sliver of green. I don't see that green, for example, on their map. They seem to be going beyond the boundary of the
Over on
acre
this
property.
side?
Yeah, right here. All this.
Yes,
This
I
right
think
here.
on their map, what I was seeing on their map is they're proposing that boundary buffer around these,
Yep.
not on this side at all.
Right.
Okay, yeah, so what, this is, that would change the zoning on this other property?
No.
No?
Because again, you can only change the zoning on their property, which is subject to this appeal.
Okay,
So basically, it would follow their property line and then this property line with the buffer along the edge of it, if you went with the wildlife biologist recommendation.
okay.
But this little piece of resource protection would stay.
Correct.
So the buffer would go to their property line?
Just about a little bit over, if you look at the
Yes.
biologist diagram, the black line.
This-
Yeah.
Maybe we could, it's not really a buffer, right? I mean, it is a resource protection boundary.
You could modify the boundary to be that.
Yeah.
Correct, okay? I'll look at it.
Thank you.
That might be,
So in reality, what does that 250-foot buffer do?
So it basically allows, in this case, it would allow them to develop their property. It provides property owners some relief. Because the resource protection requirements are pretty stringent. So I think in this case, the buffer is, it's not really for, well, it probably provides some buffer for, animals and that kind of thing too. But it provides relief to the property owners who have a business that's near resource protection. That's my interpretation of it.
So remember, that we can, at this appeal, we can only deal with this property. So the only thing that would be encumbered by resource protection are these little teeny parts of their parcel. Only the parts of the buffer would be resource protection.
That's
on the-
scenario
on the
number
fringes.
3.
Most of that property would be out of resource protection if this is the opportunity you chose.
I can't quite see what they're looking at here.
It's the labella,
Labella, that's number 3.
that's the third.
That's the third one, so the
It's actually
the labella
3 to 5.
option. Again, 3 different options. One is just to take the business out, okay? 2 is, at least this is what's being presented to us. 2 is to take the business out in addition to this 250-foot buffer, okay? which is what's being recommended by Inland Fisheries and Wildlife in terms of their data, and that's how they've changed their data. This reflects how they've changed their data and their decision. And then the third, which we don't really see here, I believe, is to take the whole thing out. Well, I guess it's that one, yeah.
So if we want to take the whole thing out, somebody, what language would we use?
Okay, so basically what you would do is grant the relief and indicate that based on the data of the Labella Natural Resource Assessment, that the only portions of this property that should be included in the Resource Protection District based on the wildlife habitat qualities listed in the ordinance would be maintaining a 250-foot buffer from the wetlands. This is from the language of their report, associated with this stream and floodplain system. And that's that black line. So what we would do is adjust the zoning map to pull that line from their property to that black line along this property line.
So
There are two black lines, George.
Before we go down that road, we're here tonight to have a public hearing, and we need to hear from the public.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so I'd like to take this opportunity, unless anyone is opposed, any board members are opposed, to open the public hearing and to hear from the public.
What time is it?
It is 7:32. So at 7:32, I'm opening the public hearing. We'd love to hear from neighbors and from the public in general, what your thoughts are. Thank you. If you could tell us your name and where you live, that'd be helpful.
John Benedict, I'm at Run Around Pond Road.
Okay?
My property is also affected by this resource protection. And I'd just like to share what I've learned about the blanding turtles, occurrence in the area. And I've been in communications with Derek Yorks, who's the turtle and reptile specialist that works for Inland Fishery and Wildlife. He's in Bangor, and he actually recently visited my property to assess whether there's blanding turtle habitat, and we found none. They apparently are very finicky and have special needs for habitat. The main thing that I wanted to share is that I was curious as to why their department has never conducted any research or verification of the turtles since that one sighting.
Yeah.
And his answer was, I quote, "typically don't consider just one occurrence sufficient to warrant any research, but would possibly investigate after 2 and definitely after 3 sightings." End of quote. So, yet they apparently consider that sufficient enough evidence, that one sighting sufficient enough evidence to declare the whole area blanding turtle habitat and put it on their maps. And I find that to be a double standard in their policies and totally irresponsible, especially considering how the maps are used by municipalities and relied upon to be factual. And I relayed my thoughts on that to them. And in this instance, the turtle being in the co-occurrence map is not at all based on research or science. And so because of that, and reminding you of what Derek Yorks said from the FOAA request that my neighbor made to the Inland Fishery and Wildlife was, quote, "We have not done any trapping surveys in Durham, but after 23 years without any additional reports, I'm not incredibly optimistic about the possibility of an outlying population here," end of quote. And so because of these 2 reasons, I think the Hagers should be relieved of the burden that the town has placed upon them that has totally disrupted their lives for the last almost a year. Although I think they have proved that without my help. And I'd also like to say, yesterday I talked to Justin Chalayan, that, well, he was works further up, beginning with Habitat, and he was the one that clarified their maps for the developed area. And he told me that, well, you've discussed this already, that their department is currently working on a new co-occurrence map for Durham, and that will be available soon. And I'm very optimistic there will be no landing turtle habitat on it. That's what I have to say.
John,
Thank you.
who's the guy you talked to from Bangor, from IFW?
Derek Yorks,
Derek
he's
Yorks, how do you spell it, do you know?
Yorks. He is the turtle guy in the state. He's in,
Thanks.
yep.
Thank you. Don't be shy. Is there anyone else who would like to just express an opinion about this deal? Yeah, come on up.
Hello, my name is Luke Poussard, run around Pond Road. I can't say I really have a dog in this fight, but I think that when I first was researching this last year, I came to the same conclusion. I spent a lot less money than you did to figure it out, though. And I think that their evidence they've provided has been pretty clear. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, thank
How do you
you.
spell your last name, Luke?
Poussard, Poussard.
Come on up.
I'm Linda Callenbach. I also have property on Runaround Pond Road, and what they said, yes. I mean, this whole circle that's been.
The circle.
The infamous turtle circle. If this whole property of theirs was put into resource protection based on a false premise, that there's rampaging, blending turtles all over the place, they should be given the relief, for sure.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because my understanding of the Beginning with Habitat program is that if you go on the website and you look at this information, it says that it's advisory. You know, that this is, primary intent is advisory. And I think where, you know, kind of the rubber is meeting the road here is when it's being applied to ordinance. In some cases, maybe the data, you know, doesn't really fully support that.
Yep. Okay.
Man, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Linda Callenbach, Kallenbach.
Thank you. All right, excellent. Come on up.
Ray Bowden, I live right next to the Hagers. That
Uh-huh.
little strip is my property.
Okay.
I have just one concern. If you decide to give them this big buffer, I mean, look at that compared to, this is all resource protection for me. If you decide to go this route, I think I'm getting screwed.
Uh-huh. So, can you say a little more in what way?
Well, I heat my house with wood. I cut a lot of firewood
Oh, okay.
on
Yeah.
my property, and,
Yeah.
and I cut mainly right about in this area.
Okay.
And I understand with this resource protection, I could be limited to how many trees I can cut.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't go to the town meeting last year because I was sick. And so, is that true that,
I couldn't speak to that. You would have to speak with Alan or George with regard to limitations on forestry practices in the resource protection area.
And we'd have to look into the ordinance and talk to the Forest Service.
okay,
Yep.
I got you. Anyway, I.
So you're saying it could have some negative
I'm with the
consequences, you
Hagers.
feel?
Which one? You know, this one makes sense to me.
Okay, so this is the one from Labella? This is number 3?
Yeah, Bella.
Okay, and it's basically,
I just want to put my 2 cents worth in.
okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. All right, excellent. Come on up.
My name's Darren Baker. I'm at 290 Runaround Pond Road. Couple of questions on options 1 and 2. You had made reference to the business, you know, taking the business out of protection. Did you mean the developed area?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the developed area.
Devil's in the details.
That's right.
You know,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you're
yeah,
gonna be
yeah.
writing something, make sure.
That's
yeah,
exactly,
okay.
the developed area.
I liked what this gentleman said before. The most comprehensive data would be the boots to ground data, which would be option 3.
Uh-huh.
And that's what I'm asking, recommending you do.
Yep.
And I think as far as Mr. Bowden is concerned, I think this appeal process would benefit him as well,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
That's how we're doing here, so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent, thank you all.
I do have
Yes,
a-
Alan, if you could read the letter from Lois Chesley, I believe.
Yep, I have a letter from Lois Kilby Chesley, who couldn't make this meeting, 31 Runaround Pond Road. I'll try to read clearly, tell me if I'm mumbling. Regarding public hearing, Hagar Appeal, Tax Map 862. I'm in support of a change to the characterization of Map 8, Lot 62, a home and business owned by Howard and Sandra Hagar on Runaround Pond Road in Durham. There are many factors that support the change, however, I'll focus on 3 primary reasons. 1, in response to a FOAA request I made, I received the following from Becky Orff in the Commissioner's Office at the MDIFW in September 2023. In summary, biologist Derek Yorks stated the following: an adult landing turtle was found crossing the road back in May 2000 and reported to the department by a Stantec employee with 1 photo. It's a good solid photo record that has puzzled us for years given the location, just far enough outside of what we generally consider to be this species range in Maine, but not so far outside that it is totally implausible that it could be part of a natural population in Durham. We have not done any proactive trapping surveys for this species in Durham, but after 23 years without any additional reports, I am not incredibly optimistic that the possibility of an outlying population here. This information disputes the position taken by the town of Durham that the area around Runaround Pond and the adjacent streams and vernal pools are habitat to a sustainable Blandings turtle population, or even one. Number 2, the town maps were described to me by the town manager on or about December 7th, 2023, in a verbal conversation as a 30,000-foot view of the area. It's hard to imagine an important decision such as the placement of a property into resource protection based on an approximation. It's my understanding the Hagars hired a specialist and have provided the town with a report and natural resources assessment, including wetland and stream delineation. In addition to MDIFW provided proof that due to a mapping error, the Hager's property does not abut an undeveloped habitat block of over 1,200 acres. The information used by the town planner was designed, when designing the maps used by the town were not and are not accurate. Number 3, the town has ordinances described to a committee I sit on by the town manager in November 2023 as the town's laws. When, at an August 2023 select board meeting, I referenced the failure of the town to follow its own ordinances, I was told by a select board member, ordinances can be changed. When a town ordinance is not appropriate, not followed only occasionally and randomly, or it is based on inaccurate information or misrepresentation, the town is obligated to find a remedy. In the Hager's case, the remedy is to change their property designation to fit reality based on accurate evidence that has been provided by professionals in the field. Having done due diligence in support of their claim to a change in their property restrictions as applied by the town of Durham, I wholeheartedly support the Hagers in their effort. Lois Kilby Chesley.
Thank you.
Let me, more comments?
Yes, why don't you come up, Mr. Hager? Come right on up to the microphone.
I just simply want to say that the time and money that we've invested, my thoughts have been all the time on the many other people in this town that are placed in similar situations, that have their residents placed in resource protection and held to the strict ordinance requirements. If they have a small home like us and want to add the 30% that you can allow, it's not a great advantage. So I'm saying I hope that my efforts will help other people, including my neighbors, to find some relief from this.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any other statements from either George or from Alan? Okay,
Close the
so,
hearing.
I'm sorry?
Close the hearing.
Oh, thank you, yes. Then we will go ahead and close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed at 7:45. And thank you all for participating and offering your comments. So, and I think we should have a little discussion before we move to motion, just a little bit at least. Terry, would you like to share? I'm going to go around. Would you like to share your thoughts?
Well, I'm kind of looking at this as figure 5. I don't know if that's in the voting here or not, but kind of looked at the other maps that the town planner gave us on resource protection, or what was put into resource protection. This one.
Yep. So that's option 2, right? Can't quite see it. Isn't that option 2? That's the idea of just taking the business
this
out.
here is just a picture of the map. I don't know what option 2 would be.
So if we could just go over the options again concisely. Option 1 is just taking, or sorry, that would have been option 1. Option 1 is just taking the business out. Option 2 is taking the business out with a 250-foot buffer. Option 3 is taking out the whole property except for a few areas. Is that accurate, George? Yes. Thank you.
I'm looking at option 3.
Which is taking out the whole property, basically.
Well, if that resource protection was put in because of the
turtle?
The turtle, okay? And they ain't found one yet.
Well, they
Okay.
found one, but it was 25 years ago.
Well, whatever,
Yeah.
okay?
And it was over at my house.
I have an issue with that.
Yeah.
Came out of your aquarium,
Okay.
I have an issue with that.
Yeah.
You know, if there's a whole herd of them out there and whatever,
Right,
laying
right,
eggs
right.
every day and whatever, you
There's a-
might convince me of something different.
There is a picture in there, the guy withholding the turtle. That's,
I saw that.
okay, you did, yeah.
One turtle.
One turtle,
Okay?
right.
Nobody knows where the hell he come from.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay, so, you know, I guess if we're gonna go with an option here, right now, it would be my feeling on number 3. Now, if somebody can convince me of something different. this
Okay,
is Number 3,
yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. Okay.
okay? I
Yeah.
mean, I'd be some pissed if this was my problem. But, I mean, I understand the buffers, and the buffers would remain. Is this the same as number 3?
No.
No, it's a little different.
It's a little different, yeah. Number 3 was, that was on this one. This is number 3, right here, figure 5.
Well, that's what I'm
Oh,
looking at.
you got it,
figure
okay.
five.
Oh,
So
sorry.
if your wording were to be to take this scientist's suggestion, then those pieces would remain.
The buffers would remain, which don't necessarily
No,
mean.
those are brand-new buffers.
These are different buffers not to do, they buffer these areas.
Right. I say figure 5.
You say take it out, or 5. Yeah, got it. Okay, very good. All right, Neil.
I'm in support of your first suggestion.
What's that?
So, under the powers and duties of administrative appeals, it says the Board of Appeals may reverse the action being appealed only upon finding that said action was clearly contrary to the applicable provisions of the ordinance, or that the record of evidence compels a different conclusion. to me, the record evidence compels a different conclusion.
Okay, yeah,
The +3 Blanding Turtle thing is not real.
uh-huh,
Shouldn't have been there in the first place.
okay, yeah. Okay, Byron, you're going next, I'll go last.
Okay. I also agree. I think, you know, the fact that Inland Fisheries didn't deem it important enough to come and investigate further tells me that they didn't believe it was necessarily true, and they were just maybe throwing some sort of blanket thing out there. I mean, it's nice to put things in resource protection, because we all, you know, I mean, it's nice to keep things, you know, the way they are, but when you've got a property that, number one, already is developed, you know, there's already development there. So, you know, and the fact that, you know, one turtle by some guy who doesn't even live in town, holding it in the year 2000, or whatever it was, that doesn't work for me. So
Okay.
I think, you know, I think it's number 3 that I agree with the most.
Okay, very good. All right, I'll go next. So, well, you know, I think there's some very compelling evidence that was provided, and also some compelling comments from neighbors and from other Durham residents. I would have liked to have listened to one of the wildlife biologists we have here in town, to hear from them with regard to is this layer defensible or not in their opinion. But we don't have anyone here. So I would tend to agree with number 3, based on the evidence and the fact that they have conducted, I mean, for me, number 2 is clear. It's a no-brainer, because the ordinance is based on the BWH data, and they've changed their data, okay? So on that level, number 2 is a given. Number 3, you know, initially I was a little hesitant, because it kind of opens up a can of worms. You know, are we going to, all these different criteria, are we going to be, you know, dissecting them as the appeals board? Is this going to open up a whole new level of appeals? But on the other hand, the evidence is it really is compelling, and I don't believe, hopefully, this data layer is more of an outlier in terms of its quality, and hopefully the others aren't like this. So I would tend to agree. I would tend to agree with number 3. You know, going the whole way. And you know, the only other thing that I'll mention is it was interesting what we heard from both the applicant and the neighbor with regard to their conversation with IFNW and how they were going to be revising their co-occurrence habitat, their co-occurrence maps for Durham, and whether it might make sense to wait so that this can be addressed town-wide. But on the other hand, I see here that the applicant has gone to considerable expense hiring this consultant and doing this work. And the work seems to have seems to have some clear conclusions. And so I think we should probably, you know, honor that work and the conclusions. So I'm in support of number 3. Yeah.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
When you do decide what data you're gonna use for that, I've heard a couple people say the whole thing, and they don't even like the buffers. But if you're not gonna include the buffers, as this scientist has said, should remain, why is it you're gonna remove the buffers?
Yeah, we're not, I don't think anyone's planning on removing the buffers.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, we would need to have a basis for,
These buffers right here, these are 200-foot buffers from these areas.
That's not number 3, that's not my understanding.
So,
Number 3.
that's what
Oh,
I'm trying to
okay.
clarify.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I see. Yeah, so in my opinion, it would be the I guess it's Exhibit 5 from the from the, from these folks. Because
From this
they did
area.
identify these wetlands, right, in the report.
Yes.
Yeah,
So you can't, I just think you can't throw out those wetland
exactly.
buffers.
Right, right.
So do we need to go with
Yeah.
number 5?
Whatever you're gonna say, based on the information provided by Labella.
Number 5.
Yeah. And I would also say, as pertains to this property,
Yes.
in order to exclude, I don't exactly know how they handled some of these other properties.
Right.
I have some questions here, or, you know, I've already tried to approach them, but I'm not hearing the answer that resonates with me. So I would say only as pertains to this property.
And that should be loud and clear. We
Yeah.
can only, your authority is only to address this
Yes.
appeal.
Right, exactly.
So I'm arguing or saying that this should never have been in the habitat, the beginning with habitat criteria. So I don't want any boundaries on there. I thought that's what we were talking about.
What are these other boundaries for?
George, what are the boundaries here for, these
Okay,
wetland
if you're
areas?
going with option 3, which sounds like you'd like to formulate a final position on that, is that correct?
Right.
Which is to remove it from almost the entirety of the property,
Almost.
or the entirety of the property.
Based on Labella.
Yes, okay,
Yeah.
so, based on Labella, the wildlife biologist who has gone out and looked at the habitat in detail on the ground, then you would, basically, the motion would be to grant the relief requested by the property owner for interpretation of the zoning map per section 2.3.A.6, which says where physical or cultural features existing on the ground are at variance with those shown on the official
Okay.
zoning map.
If you could please repeat the citation of not just the
Yeah,
whole language,
I'll
but
just give you the
two
citation.
point, what is
Right.
it?
It's 2.3.A subsection 6.
Okay,
And I'll
yeah,
just read it, it'll be in the record, it's in the ordinance. Where physical or cultural features existing on the ground are at variance with those shown on the official zoning map, or in circumstances where the items covered are not clear, the Board of Appeals shall interpret the district boundaries, and further indicated by section 17.3.d, which gives the Board of Appeals authority to interpret the boundaries.
yeah,
The board
thanks.
the board determines that the actual boundary of the resource protection district on this property is according to
Okay,
the Labella's Natural Resource Assessment Report dated January 23rd, 2024. And the Resource Protection District would be relocated to reflect a 250-foot buffer from the edge of the National Wetland Inventory wetlands associated with Chandler Brook, as illustrated in Figure 5 of that report.
Yeah. Good, that's good.
I'm gonna go back and listen to this, so we'll get it word for word.
Yeah, and you can always amend that.
Yeah.
Obviously, when someone has to make it, and then you can amend it to be entirely off the property. You could amend it that way.
Entirely off the property,
Yeah.
which is what I'm saying. That's what-
no, but we have
No,
another
what I'm
buffer.
saying is based on.
There's some other buffers
based-
there that aren't,
Based on
aren't,
the report.
landings turtle related.
Based on the report, and Figure 5 of that report shows maintaining a 250 foot buffer from the,
From Chandler Brook.
from Chandler Brook.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
I
stays.
get that.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
And that's still number 3.
That's still number 3, which could be modified.
So can you make a motion based on what she said?
Yes.
Who wants to make it? I can make it, you can make it, anybody can make it, anyone would like to make it.
I move we grant the request based on George's statement and reiteration of the land use ordinance he just stated.
the draft motion of the town planner.
Based on the draft motion of the town planner. I'm okay with that. I think that's clear enough.
Are we using number 5?
Yes,
or
and
no?
if you could accept a friendly amendment and in consideration.
I'm not making any motion. This is your, this is your
If you-
motion.
I made a motion.
Thank you. If you could consider a friendly amendment and in consideration to the revisions made to the beginning with habitat, large undeveloped tracts data. I would throw that in there because that's relevant too. They're really, in my mind, they're like George pointed
So,
out.
that
right up
amendment,
front.
that amendment language would be to include as support of that motion, the letter dated January 29th, 2024, from beginning with Habitat, Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, indicating that the undeveloped habitat block data was updated with better information on existing development using updated land data, land cover data, and that their property, their developed portion of their property is not included, and the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife recommends a 250-foot development buffer. But it, or you could just, probably just stop at the data is not accurate.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So it would be the 2020, in that, this report says the 2023 undeveloped habitat block data was updated with better information on existing development using updated land cover.
Okay, so I just want to be clear here because I'm going to have to produce a decision within 5 days. Is that right?
7 days.
Okay, 7 days. And so I'm probably, unless you want to do it, unless you want to go back to, I mean, this is fairly complicated. Unless
I'll go back and do
you want to go back and do it and send it to me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And I think those are 7 working days. 7 working days you have to give a decision.
I might email George.
Yes,
But-
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I've got a question,
Yes.
just to clarify for me. This Labella map showing the buffers represents map 1.
Not exactly.
But
I-
close.
Close to it, yeah. It would
So
include.
basically, you're saying, we're saying, we're gonna relieve
90% of the.
90% of it with these buffers intact.
That's correct.
Do you,
That's
do you agree with that?
Well, the only thing that I know that on the number 5, it actually shows them buffers,
Right,
which wouldn't change anyway,
right.
Buffer.
if I'm correct.
Correct.
That's right.
They wouldn't change anyway,
Yeah.
and they would be in there automatically if we went with, what, 5 or 3? No, but it's not
number
showed
5 on
on
the-
number 3.
There's number 5 on Labella.
We're talking about removing the beginning with habitat restrictions.
Right.
Yes.
based on the
Beginning with
trail,
Habitat 6+.
Yeah, exactly.
The 6+, which takes,
Which takes us back to the original resource protected designations.
Which is
Right.
number 3.
We're not changing that, shoreline zoning. Chandler Brook buffer.
The stuff that was in resource protection
No,
before
that's-
is still in resource protection.
That.
So it goes with number 3.
yeah, it most, this,
It's basically the
it
same.
doesn't show everything, but yes.
Now, do then buffers, would they be included
This 5.
at a later date?
What buffers are you talking about?
You're saying like
The
this.
250 buffers, if you
Yeah,
want
yeah,
to
yeah,
go
they're
do.
included. We're not changing those.
I know, but we're not,
So he's saying the
You
map
mean the-
doesn't show it.
Do you mean the buffer from the river or the buffer around the developed property?
the buffers that's on 5.
5, yeah, okay. Well, those are from the river. That's, you see these buffers here? This is, notice how this buffer travels along Chandler Brook, oh, except for right here. I see it comes out. Yeah, there's there's a wetland or something here that's being buffered.
That's what I'm talking about.
What's your issue with that?
But it doesn't show it on 3.
No, it
Yeah,
does not
we're
show,
changing
does not show on what I presented.
Yeah, yeah, he didn't show it, but we're keeping that buffer. The national wetlands.
So if we vote number 3, we're going to be keeping that buffer that's on 5.
Yes,
On this one,
yes.
Well, I think,
Yeah,
what George
okay.
did is he pinned the motion to the Labella report
Yes.
and the Labella map. So what we're doing is, we're doing this as it pertains to this property. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay,
But not
thank you.
this little curve thing.
Yeah, we're doing that too, that's
That
national
will,
wetlands.
that will stay on the property. That, within that black line on that property will stay in resource protection.
All right, that's the question I'm asking.
Yeah, it's a good question.
That wasn't there
Okay.
before.
So are we voting on 5?
That's what's in
or
the
3?
biologist report.
That's what's in the biology.
That wasn't there before.
So
No, that's a
are we
whole
voting
different
on
reason
5
that's
or
there.
3?
Correct?
That's
5?
correct. It was not in
Okay.
resource protection before the map was adopted,
So if we're,
amended.
if we're finding, what I would said was, we have record of evidence that compels a different conclusion. I'm saying the Blanding turtle evidence was wrong. The whole thing should not have been in, the big human habitat protection.
This isn't due to the Blanding Turtle.
That's not due to the Blanding turtle?
No.
So why isn't there before?
I'd have to go back and look at the map that was in existence before the Resource Protection District was amended, to see whether or not any of that area was included in resource
That's a
protection.
small wetland buffer.
That's right. But wetland buffers are one of the criteria of the new ordinance.
Right, exactly. So it's a different criteria than the ordinance.
What's interesting to me is that those maps up there, a lot of the scenarios show this piece up here outside of any buffer, but this one shows it in a wetland buffer.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
I think that maybe, yeah, maybe some, yeah, I don't know. Don't know the answer to that question.
What's the question?
Well, my question was, is that on this map,
From Labella.
from LaBelle, it shows a wetland map in here. But, you know, it's not referenced.
Right, that's from these wetlands on the other side of the road.
Uh,
So what this biologist is saying, if you're gonna have resource protection based on wetlands, these would be the buffers around those wetlands,
Yeah.
Based on Maine law.
based on the environmental resources that are out there and Maine law.
And that person that gave that report, which is where you can hold your evidence. And the evidence is there. You can't remove those buffers
Right.
because the evidence is there. That biologist has said, these buffers should remain, but the rest of it can be out of resource protection.
Before we go any further, I'd like to ask the appellants, and certainly feel free to come up, Howard and Sandra, whether you have any questions about this, how we're moving forward here.
Well, I really didn't know that you would use this map as a correction of the resource protection boundaries and wetland zones, wetland resource zones. It's acceptable to me to see that you're using the 250-foot boundary to wetlands, even though it's not following just Chandler Brook, it's following an old state designated wetland just below my property, which is there. The wetland on the upper side that is closer to Runaround Pond and my daughter's house was not a part of the original resource protection wetland boundaries. And so I don't, it's kind of
Yeah.
a negative connotation to think that I'm getting myself out of resource protection and putting my daughter in to some
Well,
type.
she's got to apply. I mean, it's just,
Mr. Chairman,
we can only.
Oh, I see.
Your property.
Oh, so is there's a
But
house
if-
up there?
but on
Is
that same-
So we're putting her house in resource.
that area is not currently in resource protection and
Okay.
is not proposed to be in resource protection.
Okay.
Okay.
So somehow we need to clarify that in our motion, I think.
No, I don't think you need.
Okay.
Use figure
It
3 on
said, it
this.
said in the motion and in the
Be better.
report, 250 feet from Chandler Brook.
Uh-huh.
Wetlands associated with Chandler.
Okay, okay,
Okay.
yeah.
So that technically, if what he just said would follow Chandler Brook, not this little spur that comes off from the Chandler Brook area.
Well, it's the wetlands associated with Chandler Brook, and that little spur is wetlands associated with Chandler Brook.
Okay, we
Not the
didn't,
wetlands across the road.
Not the wetlands across the road.
okay. Okay, I understand. It wasn't phrased that way to begin with.
If there's any, this at some point, we're gonna make a decision here tonight, and this is gonna be, pen's gonna be put to paper. If there are issues, at this point, don't hire a consultant, just come back. Okay?
Okay,
If what comes out of this isn't what as expected and discussed, you're
Okay.
welcome to.
Thank
Come
you.
back, come back and see how long. Okay.
yep.
So we get.
And I'm calling him.
Right, that's right.
We got your number, you got his.
Right, Alan?
Right.
You didn't hear what he said.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Can we call a question?
Okay, yes, we have a motion. Would you please remake your motion? And your motion regarding George's statement. You all
I don't know how
The
to-
motion that I made?
No.
No, hold on.
I move that we accept George's proposal for relief for the Hagars.
The motion drafted by the town planner.
Uh-huh.
I move we accept the motion drafted by the town planner for relief.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Very good. Okay, discussion.
Yeah, we're referring to figure 5, right?
Yeah, maybe I
That's
could
right.
just restate the motion before you vote, just to make it clear.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yep. So again, you would be granting the requested relief based on section 2.3.8.6 of the Durham Land Use Ordinance, which states that where physical or cultural features existing on the ground are at variance with those shown on the official zoning map, or in circumstances where the boundaries are not clear, the Board of Appeals shall interpret the district boundaries, and further, as indicated in section 17.3.d, and that the board determines that the accurate boundary of the resource protection district on the property should be located as stated in the January 29th report of Labella Environmental Consultants.
That's January 23rd, I believe.
You're right, January 23rd. The natural resource assessment of Labella Environmental Consultants. And that the resource protection district boundary would be located 250 feet from the edge of the National Wetland Inventory wetlands associated with Chandler Brook, as illustrated in attached figure 5 of that report.
Very good. And,
And to include the IF&W letter.
yeah,
Yes.
yep. Dated, whatever, 129.
Yep.
129. All right, very good. So we have a motion, we have a second. Is there any further discussion? And all those in favor, please raise your hands. Very good, so it's unanimous. It is a 4-0 vote. I think we're done here. And you can expect a decision from us within 7 business days.
Sounds like it's gonna take all 7 too.
It may. Okay, very good.
Motion to.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All right, all those in favor?
Please.
I need updated ordinances. See the date on these?
Yep.
I'd love to have some access